Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, we now seem to have a full-on diplomatic row that is going on between the USA and the UK. Remember the story? We talked about it last night. Donald Trump retweeting 3 videos that had been sent to him by Ann Coulter, a right-wing American commentator, but had originated from the deputy leader of Britain First. The debate yesterday was less about the content of the videos, but a lot more about the fact it had originated with Britain First. And that is what led to the huge criticism of Trump, although I personally doubt he'd ever heard of them. Least of all had he ever heard of Jada Franson, the deputy leader of that organisation. But there was a lot of horror in this country, and I guess in some ways you can understand it. We've always had a tradition in Britain of not wanting or liking the far right. And don't forget that a Labour MP was gunned down on the streets of Yorkshire last year by someone shouting Britain First. So revulsion at the fact that it had come from Britain First, I understand that. I'm not sure I completely get where the rest of the story is going. But yesterday, Number 10 responded on behalf of the Prime Minister saying that it was wrong for this to be retweeted. Overnight, the President responded to the Prime Minister, and there's no great surprise there. He said, "Don't focus on me. Focus on the destructive radical Islamic terrorism that is taking place within the United Kingdom. We are doing just fine." So that is kind of upping the ante just a little bit, isn't it? And today the Prime Minister, Theresa May, has been in Jordan, and of course she's been asked repeatedly about this. She says the special relationship between the UK and the US doesn't mean we're afraid to say it when America gets it wrong, and she condemned Britain First as a hateful organisation. So still today, the focus is on the fact that it was Britain First, far more than the content or the veracity of those videos. But let's just hear Theresa May talking today.
The fact that we work together does not mean that we're afraid to say when we think the United States have got it wrong, and to be very clear with them. And I'm very clear that retweeting from Britain First was the wrong thing to do.
Then she was asked whether Donald Trump was fit to be the leader of the free world.
I've made my position clear on the tweets that I've seen from President Trump, but let me be clear about the relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States. This is a long-term special relationship that we have. It's an enduring relationship that is there because it is in both our national interests for that relationship to be there. And as Prime Minister, I'm clear that that relationship with the United States should continue. I think it is in the interests both of the United Kingdom and the United States and of the wider world.
And remember yesterday, Labour MP Chuka Umunna said that any visit from Trump to Britain should be stopped, and the Prime Minister was asked about that.
An invitation for a state visit has been extended and has been accepted. We have yet to set a date.
And back here in the UK, here's what Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour opposition, had to say.
I think it's very unlikely to go ahead. In the event that he does come to Britain, I hope he will look at the diversity of our society, the sense of inclusivity we have in our society, and my local mosque would be very happy to receive him there and talk to him about the work they do in the local community, in Finsbury Park, in supporting people of all faiths and none as part of their contribution to a wider community.
Well, that's all well and good, Mr. Corbyn, isn't it? But, you know, it is in parts of North London, and over the last 20 years we've had hate preachers, and we have had problems in this country. And when I said it was developing into a full-on diplomatic row, I say that because the British ambassador to the USA, Sir Kim Darroch, went to the White House to raise formally this issue of sharing the videos. Kim Darroch said the people of the UK overwhelmingly reject rhetoric which seeks to divide communities and erode decency. All I can say about this row is, yes, of course, if you criticise Donald Trump, he is going to respond. That is what he's like. And that ain't going to change. There's no prospect or chance of that. You can't tell a 71-year-old billionaire that he should behave like former US presidents. None of that is going to happen. As far as the reaction from our political class in this country, oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you, Chris Bryant, Labour MP from South Wales, is saying that if Trump does come to this country, he should be arrested on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport on the basis of inciting hate. The one thing I will say is that collectively, what our leaders are very good at here is not addressing some of the issues. And one of those videos was undoubtedly true, because many of us had seen it back in 2015, and that was gay people being chucked off buildings in the Middle East. Some of these appalling things that ISIS do are being done in the name of Islam, though I'm pleased to say the vast, vast, vast majority of Muslim worshippers absolutely reject that. But there's been almost no discussion about some of the vile content of that particular video, and that, in a sense, is what the president was trying to say back. But we do have a very, very big impasse, and it does raise questions about the special relationship, a phrase that was coined by Churchill after the war in Fulton, Missouri. Now, that relationship, since the end of World War II, has had its ups and it's had its downs. One particularly memorable moment was when Lyndon Johnson came to Downing Street to meet the then Prime Minister Harold Wilson to say, we've got a special relationship, and that means you've got to send troops to fight with us in Vietnam. And Wilson said, no, we're not going to do that. And, you know, within 15 years, we had the relationship between Thatcher and Reagan that was perhaps the closest it's ever been. So there is nothing wrong with us criticising America or vice versa. That's fine. However, when you get a conflict becoming as personal now as it is, via Twitter, via press releases, when it gets this personal, we do have to ask ourselves, does this exchange of words between Mrs. May and the President damage the special relationship? I want to know what you think. If you believe it has done us real damage and that this relationship is perhaps whole below the waterline, call me on 0345 6060 973, or perhaps, like me, you think, you know what, a couple of weeks ago by, this will all blow over. The people in the Labour Party, the Sadiq Khans and others who are calling for him not to come to London, never wanted him to come here in the first place. You can text to 84850, or maybe you think the whole special relationship is a complete myth anyway, in which case you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and you can watch me live on Facebook and comment there too. Joe is my first caller from Croydon. Has this war of words, Joe, damaged the special relationship?
Just a couple of points. I'm not sure how special the relationship was in the beginning anyway, but is it not very hypocritical of Donald Trump to say that about, you know, we've got other stuff going on? I mean, he's got a lot of stuff going on in America with gun crime, to be retweeting and pretty much endorsing a far right way ideology.
No, Joe, can we? I tell you what, Joe, if we just take Britain First out of this and talk about the content, do you not agree with me that a video, the one that we know is true, we're not sure of the veracity of the others, but the one that we know is true, is of itself, in terms of content, pretty disturbing?
Yes, I would agree, but my point is, it's the fact that the president of the free world and what Britain First stand for and their main ideology and agenda... I'm
not talking about Britain First, Joe.
Well, that's who he's re-endorsing.
But he doesn't even know who they are, does he? He's been sent a retweet by Ann Coulter, who is one of the 45 people that he follows on Twitter. 43.6 million follow him. Joe, what I'm saying to you is, I think the British are hung up on this because of the origination from Britain First. And I do understand that. You know, an MP was killed last year by someone shouting out Britain First. I understand that. But Joe, maybe it's in poor taste. Even if a video is disturbing and true, maybe it's in poor taste for him to have retweeted it. But is it sufficient? Is him doing that sufficient to see a diplomatic breakdown between our two countries.
For you, you're so quick to defend Donald Trump on anything controversial he does. So I want to know, if you were in his position, would you have retweeted that video knowing it was from Britain First? Would you have done it? Because you're so quick to defend him. I want to hear you condemn what he
does. Joe? Yes? Did you listen to last night's show?
No, I didn't. I missed it.
Right, OK. Well, you can get it on the LBC podcast. Joe, I was very critical last night. I said I thought it was in poor taste. I didn't think it helped anything. I said I thought he'd made a mistake. You know, I was critical of the fact that he'd done it. But I do think now the argument is moving on to the fact that we now have a big diplomatic standoff between the UK and the USA. And I'm just asking, you know, is this actually going to do long-term damage? I don't think it will, but maybe you do.
I'm not a supporter of Theresa May, but I definitely support her decision to call Donald Trump out on this. And I think if we're going to sacrifice our position, how we're seen in the political world, just to keep a special relationship going, even though we think what Donald Trump was wrong, I think she's absolutely right. And what type of friend is the USA if we can't call them out when we think they've made a mistake?
I would agree with that. No, I would agree with that. That there is nothing wrong with calling each other out, but when it sort of becomes an endless series of exchanges, which I guess social media lends itself to, perhaps that's not very constructive. Joe, I thank you for your point of view, and I repeat the point. I was critical last night, you know, of the lack of taste, perhaps, in sending these out. But I do think within that one particular video, there are issues that we should be debating. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show exclusively on LBC. It's 7:15. So when Donald Trump decided in the middle of the night to respond to the Prime Minister, a number 10 statement saying that he was wrong to have sent out those retweets yesterday, he clearly was feeling quite strongly and passionately as he sent back the words, "Don't focus on me, focus on radical Islamic terrorism, focus on the problems in your country, we're doing just fine over here." OK, that's fine, that's his opinion. But the trouble is, he made a slight mistake, and I think it is actually rather amusing in the middle of this diplomatic row. You see, on Twitter, he sent his answer to @Theresa May, which should be fine, you'd have thought. But actually the Prime Minister is @Theresa_May. Now, @Theresa May is a lady called Teresa Scrivener, who in 2009 set up her Twitter account using her middle name of May, hence @Theresa May. She's not exactly active on social media. She has 6 followers on Twitter, but that is where the President's message first went. She has today been literally inundated with thousands of messages coming from all over the world. And Teresa Scrivener from Bognor has said, "If I wanted to be famous, I'd have gone on the X Factor." How about that? A lighter moment in a big diplomatic row. So, a war of words, exchanges of texts, British ambassadors turning up at the White House. Has the special relationship been damaged? And some people are really upset. I mean, I get from Astrid here on Twitter, "May was right to call out the racist Trump on his retweets. His state visit should be revoked. I doubt the Queen wants to host him." So some people feeling very, very strongly about it indeed. And others making the point, dictators and war criminals have been given state visits in the past. Trump makes a mistake and we try to cancel his visit, says Mick. And Mick, as I say, I've said it already tonight, I'll say it again, I do understand the upset with the fact that Britain First were involved in this, given what happened last year to a Labour MP. I understand that. But once you remove that to the side and just start to look at the content and what's happened here, I think we're beginning to get a bit hysterical. That's my view. And I think if we continue in this vein, it will damage what is, I believe, still a very important special relationship. I think it'll blow over and go away. I wonder what Sherry in Hampstead thinks.
Good evening, Nigel. Can you hear me?
I certainly can.
Hi, yes. I came out canvassing with you a couple of years ago to get us out of Brexit, and I'm watching this with quite a lot of amusement, actually. The one thing even you, which I'm shocked about, keep saying is about the Labour MP. I thought that man was mentally ill who killed that MP.
He was, but
Sherry,
he was, and you're absolutely right, but he did, and it was widely reported, and it's being re-reported again today. He said Britain first. Didn't mean he was a member of that particular party, but I think Sherry, we can all understand why people are horrified at that group and some of the things that it says and does, and, not to put too fine a point on it, the record of one or two of the individuals involved.
Yeah, I'd just like to say for the record, when I've seen them marching, it's old age pensioners, veterans, people who care about their country. And at the end of the day, Nigel, you can go around this any which way you like. But the fact of the matter is, our country is changing to an extent that I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And people are getting angry.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, there's an awful lot of people like me out there who love Donald Trump, who thinks, why wouldn't he do this? Who's going to stand up for our country? None of our politicians, not one. May goes around with her headband on. I've told you 2 years ago, if you go to Queen's Park at 3 o'clock, there is nobody left who is English. They're covered from head to foot in those clothes. They don't look at us. They don't respond to us. There's no way you mix with them. I live in London, and I am ashamed of what's happened.
I do, Jerry, I do. You know, Corbyn talked earlier about our wonderful diversity, but you're talking about what you're seeing as being actually not diversity, but complete separation. And I do understand, Sherry, I do understand that a lot of people out there are very upset. I get it. I do understand it. Jamie on Twitter says, the special relationship will survive Donald Trump's tweets. I'm guessing, ultimately, that's... I mean, remember, back in January, when he brought in the so-called Muslim ban, I mean, there were actually big protests taking place in Westminster and demands for him to be banned. And we kind of got over that. Mohammed is calling from Birmingham. Good evening, Mohammed.
Hello there, Nigel. I think if you can allow me some platform, I think people need to hear the truth. I'm actually from I am from the Pakistani community, and I think people need to hear the truth, because I'm actually tired of people bending over for my community when it is my community that are racist towards the whites. This is not even spoken about. This is not even addressed, because people are too afraid to go there in case they are called racist.
Yep.
I mean, there has been incidences where men from my community have actually attacked white people, right? Recently, you probably heard a 48-year-old lady, Nikki Hurst from Leeds, was brutally attacked by men from my community, 48 stitches, and yet nobody speaks about that.
Mohammed, look, I what you're saying is interesting in the sense that there is, wholesale denial amongst much of our establishment. People don't want to discuss the fact that there are problems there. Having said that, do you think that the video content was in good taste or bad taste for Trump to send out?
I think, there is an issue there, and Trump tried to address that issue by retweeting it. And I think we need to also ask ourselves, why do groups like Britain First exist in the first place? Because we got men from my community that have actually brought about this, right? Because of if anybody who actually heightens community tensions is men from my community. Why is it, right, thousands of people that leave Islam in this country are having to hide because of fear of attack? 3 of my friends were almost killed for leaving Islam. These issues need to be addressed. And Mr. Trump, I take my hat off to him. He is trying to highlight issues. Maybe it's not in the best way that he's done it, but he is correct in what he's trying to say.
That's really interesting, Mohammed. And where I'm really in agreement with you is we are not having a proper debate about these issues in this country. We're in denial over it, and that, I think, is why things like Rotherham and mass abuse happened. And you're right. And a previous caller, Jerry, made the same point. There are a lot of people out there very angry and feel we're not having an open, honest discussion. Mohammed, fascinating phone call. Tahir from Hendon says, I am a Muslim and Donald Trump is welcome here. This has been blown out of all proportion. We need the USA as allies. You're quite right. It is now getting blown out of all proportion. Tony is calling from Windsor and a first-time caller to this show. Good evening, Tony.
Hi, Nigel. Look, this is utterly bizarre. We've now got a position where Her Majesty's government is monitoring Donald Trump's Twitter account and responding to it.
Yep.
I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, I'd never even heard of Britain First. So
Tony, a lot of people said this last night to us. They'd never heard of them.
From what I can gather, they're just somebody who is mainly active in, like, a couple of towns in Kent. And now they appear to be, like, everywhere. There's something in the Evening Standard online.
Yeah. I
mean, the thing is that the tweet stands for itself, and people can come to their own conclusions about it. And Theresa May, it appears to me, has been bounced by, like, the chattering classes and pressure groups to, like, say, oh, we don't approve of it. But the thing is, once you go down that line, then you're actually just as bad as the persons you're accusing of, retweeting because you're getting into a slang.
Yeah, I mean, Theresa May mentioned them by name today in that statement, and we played you the clip, Tony, earlier. Would it have been better if Theresa May had ignored the organisation?
Well, ignored what Donald Trump said, because now she set a precedent. So every time he says something that people are up in arms with, and I do think that was a balmy thing to do. Most sensible people do.
Yeah, the trouble is, she's the Prime Minister, she's chairing a press conference in Jordan, she's getting asked question after question. She had to say something, Tony, didn't she?
Yeah, I know. The thing is this going to be a case every time that Donald Trump better than other people, and he does tweet lots of things about different things that most people now think is quite bizarre. Are the government now going to, like, rebut, or do they have to actually say something every time?
I guess the answer, Tony, is every time at a press conference they're asked an awkward question by the media. I guess you're right. A precedent has been set and they'll criticise him every time. It's mad. Tony, I think you're absolutely right. Many feel this has been blown out of all proportion. Chuck on Facebook says, nothing to do with May. She ought to be focusing on the day job. Let the Americans worry about Trump. He is their business, not ours. Lowry feels, after recently visiting the USA, I feel our special relationship is a really bad idea. It's a hollow place. Well, Lowry, you may not like America, but I tell you something, there are tens of thousands every month flying out to Disneyland, and a lot of Americans in London, I've noticed. Not surprising, given how relatively weak the pound is against the dollar. And through business, through cross-investment, and through shared history, there is something pretty remarkable, I think, about what our two countries achieved, particularly through the carnage of two world wars. We are different in many ways, but hey, we're pretty close in many others. And if any of you out there have got children in their teens, just think what the cultural influences on those children are. They're not European, they're not French, they're not German, they are American, almost overwhelmingly. So like it or not, our two countries are very close indeed. We are the absolute linchpins of NATO. And for those of us who are Brexiteers, one of our big hopes has been that we can make the Atlantic a little bit narrower and start to get a better, closer trade relationship. I would hate to think the prospect of that happening had been damaged because of something that had happened at 7 o'clock in the morning on Twitter. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. The British Prime Minister and the US President go head-to-head in a war of words over the retweets of those videos yesterday, which were thought to be perhaps not true and very distasteful, but of course it's because Britain First was the originator of this that we've really had the scale of row. And I'm asking you, is the special relationship going to be damaged by this? Also today, we had the release of the immigration figures. Hasn't, I don't think, achieved much news really, but net migration last year, and that's the year ending in June 17, was estimated at 230,000, and that is the biggest decrease in any 12-month period since records began back in the early 1960s, a drop of 106,000 people year on year. Some people, Professor Jonathan Pauses of King's College says it shows we're a less attractive place for European migrants. Lord Green of Migration Watch says it's a very welcome reduction in net migration. It points to what could be achieved once the UK gains full control over our borders. What have I got to say about this? Well, it may be a step in the right direction, but it's still a massive figure. Just think about it. During the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s, until Blair got in, net migration averaged 30,000 people a year. That is what we were used to. It is still hovering around the 250,000 mark. Down, but still a major issue. Graham on Facebook says to me, Theresa May has found her voice at last. Can't wait for her to tell the EU off. Do you know what, Graham? I'm not going to hold my breath on that, because I listened to the Florence speech and she said how wonderful they were. One thing that is interesting is those that are the most fiercely critical of Trump appear to me to be those that are most in favour of Brexit being reversed or believers in the European project. And I've seen this through my 18 years as an MEP, that people generally feel much more in favour of one than the other. The big exception being Tony Blair, who said yes to both on every single occasion. John is a first-time caller from Wimbledon. John, is this going to damage the special relationship if it exists?
Nigel, I'm probably one of those people who is anti-Brexit and is anti-Trump. But right. On this, I think I agree with you, actually, which I don't often agree with you, but I'm very willing to say that the circumstances when I do. I think in the long term, it probably won't. I think the relationship with America is bigger than Trump. It's bigger than this row.
Yes.
And it's something which, in Britain's interest and in America's interest, it's important to sustain. And I suspect that there's hundreds of American congressmen and senators at the moment that are just embarrassed as hell that this is happening and want to do it. Well, I suspect want to do everything they can to repair the relationship that, in a small sense, that has been damaged.
So you do believe, John, that there is a special relationship?
Well, I think there is, because that's something it's decades old. As I say, it's sustained more. I mean, this president is exceptional, and he's doing more to damage it than any other president in history. But it's more durable than there's too much cultural and economic connection between our two countries.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think there's that will. It will sustain us beyond Trump. The issue of this, I think, is that Theresa May has no choice. She had to condemn those tweets, and obviously, I think you have to condemn those tweets because they simply don't represent the Muslim community around the world. And what Donald Trump is doing is identifying very, very bad examples, most extreme, horrific examples of individuals who claim that they're Muslims, but they don't represent the vast majority of Muslims.
Although, John, I did read out large chunks last night of the speech that he gave in Riyadh, and he was making the point that fundamental Islamic terrorism kills a lot more Muslims than it kills people from any other religion or background. And he was in Riyadh making a point. I'm not against your religion. I'm against the extremists within it. And why don't we have a debate and work together to get rid of them?
But he's an intelligent chap. Well, debatable. I think he probably is. I mean, to become president of the United States, you have to have some sense. And he knows that those comments, what he's doing is inflaming tensions that already exist. In the mainstream media, the Muslim community are targeted very, very poorly. You don't hear anything, for example, about one of the main tenets of the faith, the zakat, the giving of charity, that every single Muslim, one of their key parts of their faith is to give donations to charity, to care for their community. That's fundamental, and people just don't realise that about the Muslim community because it's something that's never expressed.
No, but John, you would agree that there are elements of the Muslim community in the world who've been radicalised that are causing all of us a problem.
And I would agree with that, and I agree that there are Christians in the world that are radicalised. There are Buddhists in the world that are radicalised who are committing crimes against the Rohingya Muslims.
Well, no, we've seen no, absolutely, no. That is a live debate, and there's no question about that. And no one is saying it's all the fault of one group of people, and that's why some of these very extreme political parties that wish to condemn an entire religion and everybody within it are beyond the pale. John, I thank you. And John, making the point there that, culturally, economically, historically, there is a special relationship between our countries. Craig on Facebook feels differently. He says our special relationship is nothing but a false sense of security and nothing but a myth. Craig, I disagree with you absolutely fundamentally. Margaret from Stoke says, this ambassador does not speak for me. I would love President Trump to come over here. I don't know why Sir Kim Darroch thought it was the right thing for him to head off to the White House, unless he wanted to make relations between our countries worse. On Twitter, I get, better to be in bed with the US than the EU. You see, people tend to favour one or the other. It's quite a common thing I've noticed. Lorraine is calling from Chelmsford. Have we damaged the relationship here, Lorraine? Should there be a cessation of hostilities?
No, we have not damaged the relationship with America. They are our greatest allies.
Yep.
It's not the Germans or the French. It is America. They have been and they always will be. But what I would like to say is I'm getting fed up with these commentators and politicians, the like of Sadiq Khan and Umana Chakur, coming out and saying that they speak on behalf of all of us British. They certainly do not speak on behalf of us all. In fact, there's a lot of us in this country that are fed up with hearing that they're speaking on our behalf. I get the impression that the Remainers want to damage our relationship with America so that we do not get a trade deal. They would see our country not get a trade deal because they want to overturn the referendum so that we have to stay in the EU. These are the people that would see our country demolished to nothing more than a region of a Vichy Franco-German empire. That's how I see it.
So you see them as sort of saboteurs, Lorraine, do you?
I certainly do, yes.
And so the British ambassador, Sir Kim Darroch, but he did speak for you, Lorraine, because he said that people in the UK overwhelmingly reject this rhetoric.
Well, we certainly do. Everybody that I've spoken to today are absolutely fed up with Wahhabism that's being brought into this country and into Europe. It's destroying Europe. As well as our country.
There are certainly, Lorraine, some huge problems. Lorraine, thank you. Very, very passionate call, and we've had several tonight. People saying, what people are saying is the reason you've seen the growth of some extremist groups is because there's been so much denial amongst our main political leaders and a lack of proper open debate about many of these problems. Still doesn't mean that necessarily it was in good taste for the president to retweet those things. I don't think it was. But maybe, as we see our leaders lining up to condemn Britain first, which they ought to take out of the equation now, and to condemn Trump, and we see much of the media going along with that narrative, maybe once again there's a gap opening up with how most people see it, and a lot of people in this country, many millions in this country, think this argument about what's happened on Donald Trump's Twitter has simply gone too far, and it's time to end it. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:45. Well, one thing this current row between the US and the UK does show us is that social media and Twitter is changing the world. Indeed, people are following this show via Twitter, via Periscope, watching it live. And Donald Trump, of course, has been the master of Twitter because he's got 43.6 million followers. Twitter itself has come under a great deal of scrutiny over the last few months, and we learned today that Twitter has halted its process of verifying accounts, saying it was perceived as an endorsement, and said it was reviewing accounts with the blue tick, a symbol that marks the accounts as genuine. So it does pose Twitter a bit of a problem. Donald Trump poses Twitter a bit of a problem because whilst some people out there, many people out there may not like the stuff that he says on it, the fact is he has been their best brand advertiser ever. So we'll watch that story and see what happens. But back to the special relationship. Has it been damaged? I'm going to George, who's a first-time caller from Wakefield in West Yorkshire. Good evening, George.
Hello, Nigel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm listening to lots of phone calls, seeing loads of messages, and I think there's a general feeling, if I can sum up the people so far, George, that have been on this programme, that, hey, this argument's gone far enough. We don't want it to go any further.
Absolutely. And can I just say that I think as time goes on and public information increases, I think your legacy is going to go right up and other politicians down, because I don't think we have the full facts of the EU and a lot of things that have gone on over the last few decades.
Well, history will show that to be right or wrong. But, George, the special relationship, is it damaged or can we get over it?
Well, I don't think it's caused any damage at all, because like Theresa May Lowther, she's been very clear that she's going to meet up with Trump as planned.
Yes.
And there's going to be unprecedented eagerness by Westminster and the US to keep things sweet because of the fantastic opportunity we got in 2019 in terms of trade opportunities.
Do you think Westminster recognises that, George?
I have confidence that they do. Yes, they might not be saying anything along those lines at the moment, but I mean, for all we know, there could be phone calls going on behind the scenes, and the wheels could be churning, and things could be very sweet.
Well, Liam Fox, of course, has been out to visit the USA and talk with their trade negotiators. But it's very interesting. When I heard Sir Vince Cable earlier, and he was saying that trade deals with Europe are good, but a trade deal with America would be bad and would be one-sided. And I think a majority of our politicians, George, in Westminster, think everything Europe good and most things America bad. And that's a bit where we're stuck, but I'm not sure that's where the general public are.
I don't think so at all. I think the general public will be very eager to keep the special relationship, as it's called, going. And as far as I'm concerned, the real danger we've got is turning our back in a childish manner against, any country or their leaders, such as the Labour politician was alluding to, that you played a clip of. And taking steps to ostracise countries' leaders or countries in general. That's been sort of steps towards war in the past.
Yeah, well, in this case, there's no desire to go to war. It's called virtue signalling, George. It's to show the rest of the country what lovely people they are and how horrid Trump and virtually anybody with a conservative view on immigration or indeed the existence of nation. And there's a lot of that going on. George, I thank you for your call. The special relationship is bigger than Trump. It will remain long after he has gone, says Andrew. But others look to the EU. Farage, if they just use your surname, it's not necessarily going to be somebody that supports you. Farage, we have nothing in common with the USA, but we do have a special relationship with Europe. They have more culture and history. Well, they've got more history and a different culture. As for the special relationship, hasn't looked that special to me over the last few years, but there we are. Joe is calling from Sidcup, another first-time caller. Good evening, Joe.
Good evening, Nigel.
So we've got our own ambassador, Sir Kim Darroch, turning up at the White House and shaking his fist and saying this really isn't good enough. Has this done us great damage in terms of our relationship?
I think it's just shown Britain to be a confident nation, to stand up to prejudice and racism and hatred, which is obviously the President of the United States is trying to put out.
Well, it's not obvious, Joe, is it? I mean, there are a lot of people
banning Muslims, Muslim bans, and
but Joe, Obama was the one who put the extreme vetting in place for those 7 countries in the first place.
Right. But Obama didn't make it about Muslims, about Muslim countries. Obama made it about extremists, making sure the extremists didn't get into the country, not about Muslims not coming into the country. Why shouldn't Theresa May say to Donald Trump, what you're putting out on Twitter to try and represent Islam? Why shouldn't she say that's wrong? Why shouldn't?
Do you think, Joe? Do you think that a verified video of people with ISIS flags chucking homosexuals off buildings should be banned?
What, the videos?
Yeah. I mean, is it reasonable for anyone to put that content out to be seen on Twitter?
But this isn't the Association of British Muslims putting out this video. This is an extremist website putting out these videos.
Yes, and they're doing it, and they're doing it for political reason, Joe. And I understand that, and I completely understand that. My point is that when Trump retweeted that, he hadn't got a clue who Britain First were.
Donald Trump doesn't know who Britain First is.
Of course not.
Really?
Joe, of course he doesn't. They're a tiddly, or they were until yesterday, a tiddly irrelevance. And the thing that really gets me is their popularity, the number of supporters they get, is likely to go up a lot in the course of the next week because of a sheer amount of focus on them. When the truth of it is, it was somebody called Ann Coulter that had retweeted this, who Trump knew. He trusted her. He then retweeted it. Of course he didn't check who they were.
Right. Okay. So, all right, I agree with you on that. But then this is the same as say that Pakistani caller that you had on earlier, saying that my community isn't racist, my community is racist, and all of this stuff and that. So,
he wasn't. No, come on, Joe. He wasn't condemning his whole community, but he was pointing out some of the things that had happened, and he was talking about the towns like Rotherham, etc. Exactly.
So, parts of Eltham, police covering up for a racist murder of Stephen Lawrence and stuff like this, and the amount of racism me as an immigrant faced in the 90s just because I wasn't English. This is as if now to say, oh right, so because nobody knows about them, then it's not a problem. Do you understand what I mean?
No.
Because Britain First, because Donald Trump didn't know who Britain First was, it's not a problem, the fact that he's retweeting.
Right. But if we talk, Joe, about the content of that particular video, there's no problem with that. Look, Joe, I do not want anybody out there to try to say that the whole of this religion and all of its adherents are bad. And if we were to get our politics into that position, we would alienate vast numbers of people, and we'd make the problem that exists, we'd multiply it many, many fold. But Joe, let me just ask you, and my last quick question, Joe, I'll try and get one more call in tonight. Do you genuinely believe in your heart that Trump is a bad man and holds nasty views?
Well, I don't think so. I think it's obvious for the whole world to see. I mean, his views on women...
All right. So should he come to the UK, Joe?
He's the president of the United States. I think if he doesn't come to the UK, if we don't have a strong relationship with the US, then we're going to be buggered after Brexit.
Right. So, okay, Joe, a very interesting way to end the phone call. Thank you. And I've got time for one last caller, John from Glasgow. Good evening, John.
Good evening. The strategic interests of this country does and should transcend individuals and individual presidents. The phony outrage bus leaves Westminster with increasing frequency, and it now seems to leave 10 Downing Street with as well now. We've had longer experience up in Scotland here of Donald Trump, going back to Alex Salmond and Nicola Sturgeon.
Yep.
We had the same verbal words up here as well. It has done us no good. Donald Trump turned around and said that Alex Salmond had a death wish for Scotland, and we certainly don't want to hear him saying that Theresa May has got a death wish for Britain.
No. I mean, I don't want to hear that. But equally, John, if she thinks he's wrong, she's allowed to call him out, isn't she?
Well, there are times when silence, even if she thinks he's wrong, speaks 1,000 words. And there's an old adage that sometimes saying little is better. I mean, I looked at some of Ronald Reagan's old films the other night there, and some of them might nowadays be considered offensive to public taste.
No. These things move on. John, I think your point about sometimes silence can say quite a lot is a very, very good, valid point, and I think a very good way to end our public discourse with all of you on this. My view is I've had heaps of common sense from callers, texters and tweeters. I know there are people out there that loathe Trump. I know there are people out there in our political class who genuinely feel that Europe is our future, that America is a very different place to us. But frankly, I think we've gone way over the top today with this row. I think our political class today have exposed themselves as actually not wanting to have honest debates about some very tough issues. I'm not condoning Trump sending this stuff out, but hey, we shouldn't try and damage the relationship between our two countries because of that. Wow, isn't Twitter important in our lives these days? You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Coming up tonight at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.